interviewing for. When I used to interview people as an HR manager, I would always give them the job description of the position that they were hiring for at the very beginning, just to make sure that, we were on the same page, and really for legalities, legality purposes, to make sure that they could do all of the functions that were listed on there, so that they couldn't come later and say that they needed some type of accommodation.
Oh, okay. That's a good reason to put it up there like that. I never thought of that. So I was doing some research, and I researched and found that this is somewhat common when they're trying to fill undesirable positions, particularly maybe sales positions or like commission-based types of positions where, they kind of put out that they have all these other stable jobs, but, oh, by the way, we think you'd be a good fit for this other not so stable position that's mostly commission. How's that?
Right.
And really just kind of, I really kind of wanted to talk about how to respond to that. I'm just going to move myself back a little bit. How to respond to that as a job hunter. Is there a way, like, you've got a couple of issues. One, is it not a good company to work for? Or did you just get stuck in a bad department and, this department's problematic? Does it mean the company's problematic? And what are some steps that we as job hunters can take to say, okay, that's not the job I applied for, but I still want to work for your company. I don't want to apply for that sales position.
Right. I suppose if you're asking me what someone should do, my first instinct is to say that's not a company that I want to work for. Only because I've never actually been a part of an organization who did those types of things specifically. Mm-hmm. However, I have been a part of a company that would move people into positions whether they wanted to move or not. An example would be, we had someone in this position where it was kind of a heads down position, and he killed it every day. He came in, he really didn't talk to anyone, but he was amazing. His numbers were this was in like insurance type positions, or insurance, where he was working with people to get insurance, medical insurance paid. Where they were renting equipment and things like that. So he was just phenomenal. Hello. So he was just phenomenal at what he did. Right. And they came to him and said, hey, we want you to move to a position where you're on the phones talking to people on the phones. Mm-hmm. And he's like, I don't really want to do that. He just wasn't a people person. He was a heads down, do his job kind of person. Right. And within about so they didn't move him. And within about 4 or 5 months, they moved him into that position that he already had said he didn't want to move into. And within about 6 weeks, he quit. So we lost an amazing employee because they just moved him where they thought that he wanted to go. And to me, a company that would do that, a company that would do what they did to your friend, is probably a company that's going to do those types of things. I mean, I just don't think, there's there's an off chance that it was just a miscommunication. And, you don't necessarily want to burn any bridges. But I think to say this wasn't what I thought that I was going to interview for. These are the types of positions that I'm interested in, and I would leave maybe on good terms of, if you do have positions that open up like this, feel free to give me a call. Because, or if you know of any other companies that are hiring these types of positions, because if it is a legit company, it was a legit mistake or something along those lines. But I've actually been a part of an interview process, and I had forgotten about it until you said that, early on in my career, where I drove 2 hours to this interview. They'd hyped it up, and I thought that it was going to be, I was so excited about I don't even know what I thought it was going to be, but I got there and it was selling life insurance or something along those lines. And I was like, I left like probably about 10 or 15 minutes into it. I'm like, oh, this is not what I thought it was. So, I don't know that I'd want to be a part of a company that does that, because they're aware that it's high turnover, and, it is a true bait and switch. And I wouldn't want to be a part of that, and wouldn't necessarily recommend going to work for a company that's like that.
Yeah, just to give you a little background, and you have the question up there, Misty, is we were just kind of talking. I had a friend who just recently got a position, interviewed for a position, applied for a customer service job. When she got to the interview, they told her it was a sales job.
Right.
And then they proceeded to do a sales interview with her. And I don't think she was so offended that it was a sales job as much as she was offended by the fact that she wasn't told in advance and she wasn't able to prepare herself for a sales job. Because she said herself she may have been interested in the job anyways, but just that it was like, hi, it's 11 o'clock, 11 a.m. It's our interview time. I'm interviewing you. And by the way, I just changed the job description on you. And this is what we're going to interview on today. And it was like, okay, I didn't do any preparation for anything to do with an interview. Cats, like, don't even take the job, like, run for your life.
Paraphrasing, but pretty much. Yeah.
Like, should I try to explain to them? Because it's a good kind, it's a large, well-known Fortune 500 company. And, she's like, well, should I go back to the original person who set up the interview and let her know that, I wasn't prepared, and maybe if they have something available, maybe I should go back. So I just wanted to get your take on it. Like, are you more on Kat's side of like, just run, like, don't apologize and keep it moving?
Wow. Well, my thought becomes, can you hear me okay?
Hear you great.
My thought becomes, you could switch it back on them.
Okay.
Like, basically, wow, thank you so much for this opportunity, but I would like to pursue my other skill sets in this area. So thank you so much for this opportunity, but for right now, I don't think this would be the direction I'd like to go. So you just, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. And what if I like that. That's good. If you're really not interested in a position, but I'm also wondering what happens if maybe it's a position that you would have been interested in, but but it's catching you off guard.
Yeah,
just
that's usually what happens.
Somebody says, like, okay, you're like VJ we have here who's looking for marketing analytics, and he applies for a position that's financial analytics. And he's saying, well, it's analytics. Maybe I should get this financial analytics position. And he walks in the door and they start going on about marketing analytics, but his resume is all like tailored. He's done all the research on financial analytics. He's learning about net present value, future value, and all those financial things you need to know in Excel to do. And it like catches him off guard, like, oh, I wasn't expecting to interview for this. Is it okay to reschedule, take a minute, like have that kind of dialogue and say, look, I've been preparing myself for an interview in financial analysis. I didn't know this job was available. And in fact, it's better in line with my skill set. However, can I come back, or can we reschedule so that I can, brush up on my interview for that? Or like, do you just go for it and make the mistakes? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
It does. I'm gonna let Misty, if you wanna tackle it. I definitely have some thoughts on it. I
have a couple of thoughts. One is that my thing is preventing that. So I guess we can talk about that later. Okay. But my thought becomes is trying. It is not 100% fail proof, but putting things in place so that doesn't happen, or the likelihood of that decreases. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, if it does happen, I think, to me, I hope this doesn't sound rude,
Mm-hmm.
but I would have a lot of questions.
About the company or
I
about
would
the
have a lot of
candidate?
questions about the job. If I walked in somewhere, I was going in for a marketing job, and then all of a sudden it changed to a sales job, I would be, I would have a lot of questions. Like, you know, um, it, I'd be my alarm would be up, and I'd just have a lot of questions. Like, um, and I'd be very honest that yes, I came here for the marketing job, and yet there's a sales one. And so, yes, I'd be honest that you're not prepared as well, but I wouldn't say it exactly that way.
Yeah.
I would say more like, I would like to really take a further look at it, and I don't know if this would be good idea, but to ask for some further information about that job title itself that they're asking about, if you feel it's something you want to pursue. Because I've been called before too, where it was insurance, and I knew I I was not gonna do that.
Right.
I wasn't gonna pursue the insurance. That wasn't me. And I said thank you for your time, and I left. I'm not sure I sent a thank you, although I'm not sure I would suggest still sending a thank you, but you know, I just listened to their spiel and I left. So my thought becomes, if it does seem to be something you're interested in, if you can ask some further questions, if you can get some more information, I would ask and say, I would like to consider this now at this point in time, but if we can go under the principle that I haven't had time to research in this particular area and arena, I would just go for it. I would just go for it right in there. My other thought becomes this, is that I think that employers sometimes do this totally on purpose.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I think this particular employer did it to her on purpose. But I have been in situations where my job has changed, like what Pat was talking about, where I've done a job for 6 months and then it was kind of like, that position is not really available anymore. This is what we have for you if you want to stick around. And I appreciate that they tell me. The downside is I don't feel like sometimes they don't give the courtesy of telling you when they are very well aware that that's the situation. Like telling me today that my job's not going to be available tomorrow doesn't give me much time to say no. So I kind of got to either take it or, leave with my clothes on my bed, So I don't feel like that's fair within a job, because it doesn't give you time to really look for another one. And then now you have to learn all these new things in this job that has changed. And I guess it takes different people can do that. I know people that do that all the time. They don't care. They just, oh, whatever, you want me to do something different, I want to work here. And then there's people who would rather work on their skill set. So that's important. And Kat, so what would you, and I like what you said, Misty, just getting that clarification. Tell me a little bit more about that position. I'd like to learn more. Can you give it to me on paper so we could go over it? Yeah. Taking back, I felt like what you're saying is take back the control. Don't give them the control. Don't let them say, oh, we're going to push you into this job. Say, whoa, wait a second. Now, I don't mind looking at this job, but can you tell me more about it before we go into an interview for it, so I can at least have an idea of what the job really is? Because, it may or may not be something I want to even interview for. So I like you saying that. And that's kind of the point of this discussion with the mishaps and stuff. Like, kind of like taking that control back. I read a story about a company that the woman was interviewing for a job, and this is just a funny, but she was interviewing for a job, and they had a leak in the ceiling because there was like a storm recently, and there was a leak in the ceiling, and the ceiling busted through onto her head while she was interviewing.
Oh no.
No.
That's so
The guy
funny.
that was interviewing her was like, "So, are you still interested?"
Oh, wow.
She was like, "No, you got to."
Hey.
But I think a lot of times we don't. Sometimes as interviewees, we don't understand that we have some kind of power over this process as well. And even though we're getting chosen, things can go wrong on the employer side. Them maybe pronouncing your name wrong. Should you correct them? If you correct them, should you correct them more than once? If they keep doing it, certain little boundaries and thresholds that I think we all kind of notice sometimes, and it gives you that feeling inside, like, this is not going to be a good job for me. But you're kind of like, but I don't have any money, so maybe I'll take it. So I just kind of wanted to talk a little bit more about things that happen in that arena, where it's like, well, at what point in time do you say, like, this is ridiculous and I've got to walk out the door for that sales job that nobody really wants, and they keep trying to bait and switch people into it, or that office that's not very clean or nice or well put together. And I had a terrible experience once myself where I was assigned to a temp agency, and there was a woman who had a business in her home, and she had dogs and cats.
Oh my.
And she was not very clean with her dogs and cats. And I was young, and I didn't know what to do. I literally just wanted to hightail it out of there, because I was like, I don't think I should be working in this kind of environment, and I kind of like, I think it was like lunchtime, and I just like left and didn't come back. And I was like, it's not gonna work. But I was looking at something recently, and I think boundaries, like setting those boundaries and saying, like, this is just not going to be acceptable for me, and I don't care if you pay me or you don't. At this point in time, I'm just going to cut my losses and move on. So like you're saying, Kat, so if you see this company and you determine, like, this is not a company you want to work for, do you usually determine that it's not a company you want to work for? Or have you seen it where you say, okay, first strike, shame on you, you messed up. I might interview again for this company in a different department. Do you keep the door open? Can you keep the door open and say, I'd like to make in a different department?
Yeah, I would say, you always want to keep the door open, because you never know. It could be, it's typically, well, it's one of two things. It's either a company culture, and those can change too. It takes a lot of work, but it can change. Or it's a specific person, and that does change a lot. So, and again, you never know who knows someone. For example, if somebody's interviewing with a manager of a medical billing company that bills for, and I'm using kind of my world as an example, where they bill for ambulance rides, okay, and someone else builds for medical equipment. I don't know if you can still hear me. My little thing's not working right, so just throw it over my shoulder. But, we have, those two worlds are very similar. We may have, I may interview someone. I interview Susie Smith, and I'm interviewing her for a position. Let's just say that I've done the bait and switch, where I'm interviewing for a billing position, and I switch it to a collections position, and she doesn't want to do collections. She would rather work with the insurance companies and not call the patients at home and ask them for money. If she is very gracious about declining the position or declining, and just because it's not been offered yet doesn't mean that you can't say, you know what, I don't think this is something I'm interested in. And sort of to Misty's point, I think asking for a written job description early on, if there is a little confusion. I didn't realize I was interviewing for the sales position. I thought I was interviewing for a marketing position. Do you have a written job description that I can look at? I think that's perfectly fine. I wouldn't ask, to sort of to your point, Chantel, about rescheduling. I probably wouldn't reschedule at all, because for an interviewer, if they think someone needs to prepare too much, then they're probably not a good fit for the position. If you have to prepare for that interview, you probably aren't a good fit for it. But keeping that door open, making sure to graciously back out, because you never know if somebody knows someone in another company. I don't have a marketing position right now. All we have are the sales positions, but my friend Susie, over here at ABC Medical Company, does have openings for those positions. So, that could happen, but I would always just graciously back out.
Right.
Yeah. You never want to burn a bridge ever, ever, ever.
People
Exactly.
never want to speak to again, in case management does change, right? Mm-hmm. Like you said, like those people who were doing that, who were doing the bait and switch, sometimes it's just a certain group of people that do it. And then management gets,
not a good way to communicate, because you can't
get rid of all of them. And they're like, okay, we're getting rid of this team. We're bringing in a new manager. We found out that they were doing this bait and switch on a lot of people. And, that's not what we asked them to do. Mm-hmm. We asked them to get some good salespeople in, not to, just get people in the door. Because I think that makes, as a company, that I think it makes a big difference as well. If let's say you're a recruiter and you're trying to fill a quota, but you're filling a quota with unqualified people because you keep changing the job description just to get butts in the seats, to say, look, we have 25 salespeople. Granted, not a single one of them have any sales experience, but 25 people, and then that means you as a recruiter aren't really doing your job either, because you're not reaching out to try to find good qualified salespeople. You're just trying to get a lot of butts in the door.
Right.
And you're treating it like it's a training program when it's not. Mm-hmm. I mean, if it is, it is. But if you're treating it like, you don't have to have any experience, but you could come in and you'll get a job and have a position and all that. And, you're an accountant by trade, and suddenly you're in this sales position that you really didn't want. I mean, I don't think things are going to go well regardless. So you're going to have a lot of high turnover, because people really will just take the position so that they can have a steady paycheck. And they'll spend most of their time looking for another job, even while they're at your job. You're changing your lighting over there, Kat?
No, actually, I'm trying to get. I don't know what just happened, but I'm trying to find you guys again. There, I don't know what happened.
Were you looking something up?
We can see you fine.
Okay.
So then I'm thinking about other things, like some of the other things, like if you thought you were interviewing with Joe, and you're interviewing, you're talking to this guy, and you're thinking the whole time, this guy's name is Joe.
I've done that before.
Yeah. So like, covering up some of the mistakes we made or acknowledging them and moving forward, I think is really important. People make mistakes with my name. I get called Shantae a lot. You know,
Yeah.
oh, Chantal, Shantae. And I'm like, no, I don't know where you got that from. And they're like, oh, I thought your name was Shantae this whole time for like 3 weeks. So, you know, how to graciously ask for clarification on who you're interviewing with so that you know when you're writing those thank you letters or you're getting back to the recruiter and you're saying, look, I know I interviewed with like 3 people, their names, you know, the first guy was, I think, Joe. I think his name was, I think the woman's name was Sally, you know, stuff like that. I think we could all do a better job on that. But what do you use any of those tricks that people say to use in terms of name memorization, like using the name 3 times, or have you heard of that? Yeah.
I have. I'm sorry, Kat. Did you want to
No,
go?
Go ahead.
Yeah, I do actually try and do that, but I never say an interviewer's first name. And I remember being in an interview, and the guy wanted me to use his first name, and I bombed that so bad because I'm just not. I did not do well in that aspect. You know what I mean? I call him Mr. Johnson, Miss Smith, whatever it is, but I'm not going to call you by your first name out of respect and just out of respect. You know what I mean? So that I know is very difficult for me personally. But one thing I was thinking when you were talking was that I like to coach people that when they get the call to stop. Get the call for the interview, to stop and take a moment. It's very difficult because we're so excited, but to stop and take a moment and get that key piece of information as to who you will be interviewing for and get the spelling of their name and detail as much as possible. Because actually this can serve 2 purposes. One is, yes, for the thank you, but also as well too, if you want to do research on them, like on LinkedIn, so that you can develop that rapport with them in the interview process as well too. But be aware that they could change. Don't ever think anything's a stone interview. And I think one thing that's hard is that the interview process actually is a 2-way street. It is. We don't feel like it as the job seeker person. If it's us, we don't feel like it's a 2-way street, but it really truly is a 2-way street.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think a good interviewer, a good company, all those things realize it's a 2-way street, and they're okay with a certain amount of questions, you know, clarifying a name, pronouncing a name the right way. You know, I would never be offended if somebody said, no, I'm sorry, you're actually saying my name wrong. I wouldn't be offended by that. And I think if you do have someone who's more controlling in the interview process, an interviewer that is controlling in the interview process and doesn't like questions, then again, that's probably a bit of a red flag where you need to say, this may not be an environment that I'm okay to be in. That said, you know, you have to have a balance of not having so many questions. You know, I had someone, a manager who came to me and he said, this person asked him questions for 45 minutes of, you know, things like, well, what if I have a flat tire on the way to work? Will that count against me? And, you know, and I'm like, oh, and he was really, he's like, she's really good. And I said, yeah, and she's going to be a pain in the butt. I'm just telling you right now, you know, I mean, and he's like, well, how do you know? I don't know. 'Cause I've done this for enough years that you just, I mean,
you're like, she's very smart.
It's a sign.
Thorough, and
yes.
you're not going to get anything done because you're asking questions.
You're right. And that's what I said. I actually said, you're going to have somebody like, there's another employee that he had that just, you know, every training session she was, you know, doing this. And little funny story. I had to roll out a new attendance policy as an HR manager, and somebody was asking questions. Well, what if this, what if this, what if this? And she said, well, what if your kid is like playing at recess and he falls off the monkey bars and like has to get stitches? And I'm like, I don't know, make him wear a helmet. I don't know. I can't answer all these questions, all these what ifs.
Really?
Wow. No, I could see that. I've definitely been in awkward situations. I think that, I mean, for me, I think I like to ask my questions. Personally, I ask a lot of questions during the interview. So that at the end, they don't say, oh, do you have a lot of questions? I usually try to bring up the questions maybe after I answer the interviewer's question. So if they said, Chantel, what do you know about Excel? And I would say, oh, I know this, this, and that. What do you guys use? That would be where I would ask my question. What do you use most right now? And then they say, oh, well, most right now, this is what we're doing with Excel. And then you say, oh, okay, great. So that I personally, I feel like it makes it feel like a conversation more than doing all the interviewing. They're shooting questions at me and then they go, oh, do you have any questions? And then it's like, oh, well, going back to when you asked me this question back like then, like, I just wanted to know, is this right? So I try to not give them a whole bunch of questions at the end, usually maybe one. I will say something more like, I've really asked a lot of questions throughout this interview, or I'll say, you know what, you've answered a lot of my questions throughout the interview. Thank you so much. I do have one more question, and usually that's kind of like, what's the next step in the process?
Right.
But I don't usually then shoot and fire like 20 questions at them at the end of the interview, because I feel like it kind of makes it, I don't know, it just seems choppy. Like as a conversation, it seems choppy. So if you can flow your questions in with the questions they ask, and have like a good banter back and forth, I think it makes it easier for the interviewer as well. So they feel like they're having a conversation. They're not just firing questions at you and you're going, yes, no, thank you. Right. Gosh, I don't know what to say now. So, yeah. And like you said, Misty, listening, getting those answers. Oh, how do you spell, whatever name it is? Sarah, is it Sarah with an H, Sarah with an A,
And then when you have gotten that call for the interview too as well, you can, I usually would ask them, especially if it's a difficult name, to say it for me. I would be like, can you say, get the spelling. Can you say that for me one more time, so that I would, get it within myself, so I knew how to say it. But one thing I was thinking about, you guys, is people's situation in the midst of these interviews that may go haywire.
Right.
And I think that's something we have to think about, because everyone's not in the greatest situation. Like, let's say they're on unemployment insurance.
Right.
Let's say they're on, I work with a lot of people that are participating in state programs, like food stamps and TANF, which was formerly welfare years ago. Yeah. And with those programs, to be really honest, they do not care. They don't care what jobs you get. They just want you to get a job. Right. And so I'm saying that to say that I think that, I tell people the biggest thing is we're more employable when we're employed. And so you basically have some standing ground, if it's something you completely cannot do, or it goes against your integrity, or if it's in an environment that is not safe for you or something like that, that's different. But if it seems to be viable, if the pay seems to be at least viable, I think we should maybe take looks at it, and then, yes, you may not be there forever. And I'm not saying job hop or anything, but I'm saying that I do believe in positioning. And sometimes, your positioning, it may not be the greatest, time frame and everything, but certainly it goes back to that we're employable when we're employed. Yeah. And so
definitely.
Yeah. And so I just wanted to mention that because that can be real difficult for a person. I know I've been in some interviews, and like I think when I was working for the Fort Worth Symphony, they called it an account manager position. Account manager. Right. like that, Kat?
Yes, exactly.
You know, and so it basically was sales. It was sales.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
Group sales, you know, group sales, and you know, calling people that in the past had previously bought symphony tickets and et cetera, et cetera. But you know, I said, you know what? At that time, I took the job. I took it, and I must say that I learned. I thought I am a classical music lover, and I thought I knew a lot about classical music and etc. and pop music, and I really had a lot more to learn, and I really had a deeper appreciation. I got benefits from it too, where I even sat in a box. What's that called?
Like a balcony.
When I was watching
kind of thing.
Yes. Like box seats.
Yes, I got box seats, and you know, but it wasn't but it may not have been the greatest job per se. I went in with my eyes wide open, I feel. Right. And I worked myself out of that job. So in the meantime, and it was a part-time job, but at that time I had 2 part-time jobs. Right. And my kids were much younger. So just situation.
Right. What happened? She froze.
Oh, I froze. She froze. She froze. Yep. Uh-oh, you want me to still keep talking?
We have just audio only right now.
But
I keep getting things popping up on mine.
Okay.
Oh, and I was just thinking, you know, that I was really, and I was looking at the history of things, and I basically worked my way out of those jobs and transitioned into other jobs. And those people still, you know, appreciate me. They still remember me. Right. And so I feel that, yes, like you're saying, Kat, you know, not to burn any bridges if at all possible. And so I think that's real important. But I think we have to be honest about situations.
Sure.
That
Right. And not everyone has the luxury of saying, this is a great fit, this isn't a great fit. Sometimes you need to go in and make the best of the situation so that you can start getting into that place. It's sort of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You know, I got to get my basic needs met before I can start moving up that ladder of things. So yeah, that does make a lot of sense. And that definitely changes the answers to sort of everything else that we were talking about.
Because the biggest thing, and I want to piggyback off also, is the biggest thing is that, you know, you're, as long as it's not completely crazily unethical and it's just more of a matter of taste, you really should look at the job. Like, I mean, I've had jobs where as a matter of taste, I would prefer not to have worked at because it just didn't really fit with my personality, or, you know, it wasn't really something I was excited about. But in terms of like, was it a completely unethical company to the point that, you know, by working there, you know, I felt like I was selling my soul? No. Yeah. Was it like, did it have a few moderate things that might be considered unethical? Yes. You know, is it enough to say, okay, I'm not going to work here? Or is it enough to say, I'm not going to work here for long? You know, I'm going to kind of put up with this like nonsense for a little while because it pays my bills, and because, you know, like you said, if you're employed, you're more employable. You can choose to work on your skills while you're at a job that you don't like. You can still choose to work on your skills and think about it like that. Like, nobody likes to diet. Nobody really likes to exercise. I like to exercise when I'm already in shape, but when I'm out of shape, I don't want to exercise, you know? Right. So you kind of have to look at it as like just exercise. Like, I'm doing what I don't really want to do because I know that if I keep doing it long enough, I'll get to do what I want to do. And you kind of keep that carrot in front of you. And I would say like, I wouldn't say do it all the time because I feel like you get frustrated, but I would say like every 3 to 6 months, like then start pushing out those resumes again. Because then you can say, well, I've been working here for 3 months. Let's see what's out there. Oh, didn't work out. Okay. I've been working here 6 months. Let's see what's out there, you know? Okay, let me change my skills a little bit. Oh, been working here for 9 months. See what's out there. And I think usually it does take, they say about 8 months to find a new job anyways. So you can spend 8 months being unemployed or 8 months being employed at something you don't like. You know, you're probably better off with the something you don't like because at least you're building your skills and you're keeping that gap minimized so that when people see you, they go, oh, look, she's working and she's looking for another job. She must really want to do something else, you know?
You know, Chantel, that is so interesting because you were saying some key things there. And I think that different people, and it's a little bit generational, have different viewpoints on that. Like my daughter, for example, right? My daughter is in her high 20s. And when she was younger, she wasn't going to take mess from people.
Right.
And she walk off on a job. And I'm like, what? You don't do that, you know, and my daughter doesn't have as much understanding of like the struggle, you know, taking a job you may not really like. My daughter's like, no, she's not going to do that. She really is not. And then that's that layer. And then you have people that may be older like me, and they may have been at a job for a period of time, and their struggle is a little bit different. You know, so they are kind of like, I have to find but it's in different levels. So the younger people think I have to find that perfect job. And it's more like, I hate to say more of a, what is that called when you feel
like entitled?
Entitlement?
Yes. Yes, it is. I mean, I'm just my observation. It's just my observation. And so it's more of an entitlement. But then again, us older people, we have the same thing, just flip-flopped, right, where we feel sometimes too, oh, we're entitled because I've been on this earth a little bit longer. Right. You know what I mean? A little bit more of a different mindset and attitude. And then I want more things have to be perfect with it. The money, the benefits. And then the younger people, you know, so there's it's really, really a whole, I don't know. I'm not sure if it works in our favor or if it works against us. I think I don't know if it's a website or software that we have on workintexas.com, but it's called Reality Check. And it's so valuable because it's tough, but people, I mean, need reality checks.
Yeah, it is very challenging, and I agree with you what you're saying. It is challenging for a job hunter. Like, I've seen these shows, and I don't know if I watch some of the reality TV shows or the talk shows, and they'll have somebody who has been looking for this computer programming job. They used to be a director, and they were making $250,000 a year, and they got laid off 8 years ago, and they're still looking for this director position, and everybody around them is going, look, it's over. You're not a director anymore. Just get a $40,000 or $50,000 a year job and kind of suck it up and get over it. And there's kind of, like you said, but I was a director, so I want to be a director again. You know, I've had my own struggles with that, where my problem had not become that I could suck it up and get a lesser job. It started to become like, okay, I don't know what to take at this point of a lesser job because I'm trying everything and I'm completely lost in the sauce. So, you know, I went from a job in high tech to kind of going to a different physical area where they didn't have the jobs in the high tech. And it was like, okay, so I'm going from high tech to McDonald's. Like, what am I trying to do? And then you go to McDonald's and then they're like, why are you looking for this job? You have all this experience. And you're like, I don't know. Like,
and not to like sell the whole like career coach kind of thing, but I think that's where a career coach can come in. If there's a person, if I'm thinking of somebody who's been a director and he's looking for that director level position again, and he's not getting it, he does need something needs to give, whether it's that he's interviewing for the wrong types of positions, whether that he's not interviewing well. He needs somebody who's going to be very candid with him, that is someone from the outside that can look in and say, this is why that's happening, and have that very realistic conversation of either you were a director and you never should have been, which I've seen that. I've seen either, nepotism or a company that is, I worked for a company that was such a small company that, you could kind of give yourself a title. I'm the VP of happiness, and then you go somewhere and you want to be a VP. That's not going to work. But,
right.
Somebody who's going to have that candid conversation with him of, here's your skill set, and your skill set. And this is the conversation that I have with my clients all the time. Your skill set is what determines your salary. And that's where you really need to be realistic. And what is your skill set worth? And, that's why I hated being an HR manager, because I couldn't have those conversations with people. They would come in and they would say, I'll work for $10 an hour. And I knew very well they should be making $20 an hour, but they were just willing to take whatever and come in a little bit lower, or the other way around. They'd been making $16 an hour and they weren't even going to consider $10 an hour. And I'm like, what's that?
I said, when those types of jobs don't really pay that much.
Right. Like I would have the conversation, you were actually being overpaid at this job. You just were. So, those are things that I, as a career coach, can have those types of conversations with people in a very diplomatic way. I don't know that I've ever offended someone with my candidness. Maybe I have, but I really do try to, I think I develop a relationship enough with someone that they know I'm trying to help them. I'm not doing this to hurt your feelings. I'm just being very, very honest with you. And, we need to look at that. That's why I try not to coach friends and family, because they don't take it as well. It's the same as that candidate. They're not going to take that advice from their family as well as they're going to take it from me as a third party person who doesn't have any type of vested interest. They don't have to deal with me at Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
It's always fun.
And that's what's really important is sometimes the mishaps like that we talk about also happen because you're not really qualified for the position that you're applying for. You may have dabbled a little in something, or like you said, you're a VP, but the company only has 10 people and 5 of them are VPs and the other 5 are directors.
Right.
And that's not, you're not really responsible for another company where a VP would be responsible for 10,000 people or 3,000 people. It's not the same. And the decisions that you make impact a larger audience in a different scope. So if you're not comparing apples to apples, you might not really be qualified for the position. You might be reaching. And like you said, with the finances, it's really interesting. I was having a conversation with somebody because I was job hunting, and she would ask me, well, how much do you make? And I was like, well, I make almost double of what she was making about. And she'd be like, well, how do you get that job? And I was like, well, I kind of have 15 years of experience. I went to school for it. I'm not just like randomly applying for jobs that pay a lot of money. I kind of had, I had the skills to
The
do
skill
this.
set.
Yeah. And when I look at it, and I was talking about how I was being underpaid, and I was like, I have the skill set for this position that's here. I'm getting paid about here, and I know I'm being underutilized and I'm being underpaid. It wasn't so much just that I was being underpaid. It was that they also really weren't asking me to use that skill set that would have paid me the additional money. So it was one of those things where it was like, well, I need to look for something else, because I realized that, if I stay here, with this level, it's not bad. It was well paying. It paid more than the girl who kept asking me how much I was getting paid. But,
Chantel, I am so sorry.
What?
That is so rude to ask somebody. I'm so sorry, Kat. I don't know how you feel about that. I would never ask a family member, a close relative. I would never ask anybody. I would never ask my coworkers. I would never ask anybody. I would never ask anybody, not even my good friends.
Right. My spouse would be the only person.
People that I know, I would still, if they offered and they said, oh, I make this, I'd be, oh, that's cool. But I would never, or that to me, I'm so sorry. That is rude. Do you feel that?
Yeah,
way?
I do. I do.
I felt like it was just interesting, because we were just talking about, we were just having a conversation about what was going on in that company when we were there. And I was saying, like, she was like, well, I've been here for a long time, and, they're not even giving me like my pay rate that I'm supposed to get. And my pay rate is supposed to be this. And I said, well, I'm kind of out of that range, and I was just talking to her, and I said, well, I'm not in that pay range, so I can't really speak to that, and so we were talking. I was like, well, I make quite a bit more, but I do different work, and so I'm supposed to be paid more. But I was telling her, I was like, but I'm still getting paid kind of on the low end of it as well. Like, I totally understand what you're saying, because she'd be like, well, the range said, what was it, like $15 to $20 or something, and she'd be like, but I'm only making like $14, and I don't understand why I'm making 14 when the range says it starts at 15. So they're doing something wrong. And that was her like beef and complaint with the company. And then she was like, well, how do I get to do, because I said, well, I'm out of that range because I've, have these skills and experience. And she was like, oh, and then I was talking to her, not specifically about how much I made, but I was talking to her about the range for the type of work that I do, and how I was like, well, I should be in this range when I go on salary.com. And, when I look up my job and I look up the skills that I have versus necessarily like the skills that are being used, but the skills that I actually have, I say, well, I need to find a job in my range, because this really is kind of not quite in my range. It uses some of my skills, but if I were using all of my skills, I'd be up here, And so when we were talking about that, it was an interesting conversation, because like you said, I don't think she really understands really that part of work, that, just because we work on the same floor doesn't mean we do the same thing, and it doesn't mean we get paid the same money. And just because I'm not in a corner office doesn't necessarily mean that now we're all the same, because I think there's a lot of people who really do think like that. They go, oh, well, I'm on the same floor as you are. We must be doing kind of similar work, so we should all be like in the same boat. Mm-hmm. And I don't think people really understand that you could be totally separate. I mean, I could have been making more than my manager, depending on how the company was structured and like what kind of job I did. You know, there were people sitting in cubicles in the sales department that were making 3 times as much as I was making, or 4 times as much, as because they were in sales, and like they get a huge bonus if they sold like a lot of stuff, you know? But yeah, they sat next to me, but it didn't mean that like, so I think it was very interesting because I felt like she didn't really understand that. And she would say, oh, I hear that people on your team get paid really well. And I'm like, because we do a different job, you know? Like, that's why we get paid well. We deal with more stuff than you have to, you know, necessarily deal with on a daily basis. Like, where our impact to the company is different than your impact to the company, you know? And your skill set is really going to be about how much what you do impacts your company and how much training it requires, as opposed to maybe a position where you could just kind of throw the next person in there. You know, with any company, like if you're in a customer service position, a lot of times people believe like that's kind of the lower end of the spectrum. And a lot of times they'll hire a wide swath of people to do customer service, but they're paying you $10 to $12 an hour. You know, they're not expecting you to have a lot of excellent customer service skills even. They just want you to show up on time and to read the script. You know, if you show up on time and read the script, you're good to go. Like, they don't necessarily want you to think and, you know, bring your own personality to it. They're like, that's fine. Show up. Whatever it says on this paper, you do it. If they say yes, you say this. If they say no, you say this, and keep it moving, you know?
Yeah.
But when you get into positions where you really have to like bring something to the table, then you have to have a background and you have to know how much it costs. But I totally understand what you're saying, Missy, in that, in terms of, I believe there's 2 issues that we're kind of talking about. So you're talking about, you know, like your daughter and saying like what she wants. And I think with our younger generation versus our older generation, there's definitely a disconnect in talking about pay. I also think that because of the internet, there's so much stuff online about pay. You can go to salary.com, you can go to all these places, and you can see people that have jobs that are similar to yours that are telling you you're getting paid this amount of money or that amount of money. I know with my friends, when we first got out of college, like we were all like comparing our salaries to each other and what's the offer, and, you know, did you make, you know, are you in this range or that range? Because we all kind of went to school together, and we all kind of were in the same range at that time. I think things probably have changed quite a bit, but I do think that dialogue seems to be a little confusing because the companies tell you don't talk about salary with your coworkers, right? And there's that general thing that you shouldn't, but if you can go on salary.com and you can say, look, I'm not getting paid enough. You know, this job pays $60,000 a year and I'm only making 40, you know, and from what I see, I do all these things. So what's going on? And,
yeah, and as a
dialogue.
As a career coach, I always warn people, do not look at salary.com because you almost will never compare. And we used to have, I'm in the Cleveland area, go Browns. I'm in the Cleveland area playing right now. We had a resource that we could go to that was specifically for the Cleveland area. It was just,
did she cut off on you?
It's a frozen.
Specifically with
Oh.
Oh,
I think she's coming back. Okay, you were frozen for a minute there.
Oh, I just said you guys are both frozen right now, so I wasn't sure if you could hear me.
You were frozen.
All right, I was the frozen one. Yeah. But I know, make sure I have a good face for I don't know if you guys saw on Twitter. I had that one Twitter thing where I'm like, it was just like nuts. And actually, Chantal, you posted something where the two of you were laughing and it was like a loop thing. And I was just like going, just like watching the two of you laugh. It was hilarious.
Well, that's the Twitter tell a little bird thing, and then it takes like a little snapshot of us.
Yeah, and it's like, but it was like a loop. So like you two were both laughing, and I was just like looking at you like you were crazy.
Yeah.
I was like, do I ever look at them like they're crazy?
Like, are we all like retarded?
It was so funny. I tried to find it tonight. I was trying to find it.
But so you said,
I do
don't look at salary.com and then you kind of cut out.
Yeah, I always encourage people not to look at salary.com because I've done a lot of where I've had to do job analysis as an HR manager where I had to go in and find out, I'm trying to remember what they're called. It's not salary analysis, but it's basically where I would make sure we were competitive in the positions that we had.
Right.
And so, I did those studies, and I have never seen salary.com be correct. It's inflated tremendously. And I always tell people it will just make you feel bad. That said, you had mentioned something about companies tell you not to talk about your salaries.
Right.
And I've worked for a couple of different organizations that had a couple of different schools of thought. And the one was, don't talk about it, don't talk about it, don't talk about it. And I was their HR manager. And the reason they were saying don't talk about it was because they were shady. To be totally honest, they were paying people these crazy amounts that, person A would come in with a skill set and they would pay her a certain amount, and person B would come in with that exact same skill set and they would pay him a different amount because they could. That's what it was, because they could, for various reasons, whether it was this person was a better negotiator, whatever, whatever it was. Now, the other company, that small mom and pop company was bought out by a global organization who said, talk about it all you want. We're putting it out on the line. Everybody knows what everybody else is making because we're doing it the right way. And we brought person A and person B, so they were making what their skill set said they should make. And that was the company that I liked working for, where it was like, you know what? Everybody kind of knew what everybody was making, or at least a range. Within a range, they could figure it out because the company was up front. There was no hidden agenda.
Right.
People were getting paid what they should.
Yeah, I also found out too when I was working. So like some companies, how much they pay because they post it when they're posting the job online, and they're saying like, this job pays this much. You do have the negotiating thing, where people can negotiate their salaries higher or lower. I read a story about Oprah Winfrey, who, when she was a television broadcaster, she was doing the news, and she recalled a story about herself saying that she went in and she said, well, I want to make as much as John is making because I'm co-hosting. I don't know if his name was really John. I just made that up. But I'm co-hosting and we're co-anchoring the news together. So I know he's making more than me. I should get paid the same. And she said her manager, who was kind of a young person who was trying to like make it as, this producer, this manager, just basically said, well, you're a single woman with no kids and you're young. So, you're not going to make any more than what you're making now under me, And so so essentially that's what he was saying. And she said that's when she realized, she was like, there's nowhere for me to go in this company. Like she said after that, she never had that conversation again. And she just kind of, let it go and said, for another place to work, that's not going to do that. And I do think that that's really, really important. I've worked with people who've asked me a lot of personal questions, and I know that's against the rules, but like you said, like Misty says, it's like, okay, but I need a job. So my question is, do I go and try to find a discrimination lawyer? Like, what do I do? Like, you just asked me all these off limits questions during the interview. So I can either fight it, I can go to, the company. I luckily was working with an agency. I could go to the agency and say, look, this person's asking me way too many personal questions. I don't know if they just don't know the rules, or, because there are people who I think don't know the rules. Or don't.
Yeah, I've had to train new managers. I've had to train new recruiters.
Why the rules are there. They don't really get it. They're just like, well, but that makes sense.
Be friendly.
Yeah, it's why should you make so much money? And it's like, right. Because you're doing the same job. The money should be about the job, not whether you have children or not children, or 5 kids or only 1 kid. The point is, the job should kind of pay what the job pays.
Right. And I don't know what your name is, WGP, but you ask, why do employers involve your personal life when it should be about your worth ethic and value to the company? And it should. And if they are asking, I actually watched a scope the other day where someone, and I won't say the name, but wow, was I like on fire. He was interviewing a virtual assistant. So it was really cool. He was doing like a Skype interview with a virtual assistant, but it was overseas. And he was asking her, so do you have any children? Are you a single mother? Are you married? Like all these things. And I'm like, what are you doing? Why can you ask? And I don't know. I've been out of the loop of those types of things because I've been doing the career coaching thing. But I typed on there and I said, that's illegal. You can't ask her these questions. And he said, they're saying I can't ask you these questions. And I actually can because you're in the Philippines and there are no laws against it. And I thought, well, you're a jerk. But, wow. As far as Walter, okay. Walter, you've been here before, right? So, as far as why they ask you those questions, I mean, an employer is trying to gauge whether or not your personal life is going to come into effect because they've probably been burned before with somebody whose personal life has come in, but it is illegal for them to get too personal. Sometimes I found new managers were trying to be friendly, so they'd ask him a lot of questions. And I sat next to a recruiter. I was not his manager at the time. I feel like maybe I've told this story before. He asked 7 illegal questions while we were there. And I thought, oh my gosh, I need to address it. We were both working late, it was after hours and he was just on the phone chit-chatting. He's like, oh, so you need Saturdays off because what religion are you? I'm like, don't ask that. So yeah. It's crazy.
No, I understand. And I guess where my question is, you get so excited that you're getting interviewed for a job. You get so nervous that you might mess up. As a applicant, a lot of times I know the question is illegal. I know it's illegal when you're asking me it. And it's like, how do you prepare for it? What do you do when it happens? What course of action do you really have? Because now the question's already been asked.
Right. Yeah.
More than likely it's already been answered by you because you may not have known to say, oh, I'm sorry. You kind of want to say, you really want to say, that's none of your business. But then you're like, but if I say that, then I might not have a job. So how exactly do I say that in a way that's like, look, you're crossing the line here, lady,
right.
Gentlemen, like this is just not appropriate to ask when it's questions that they're not like socially, they wouldn't be considered unacceptable.
Right.
Socially, it's not unacceptable to ask somebody, do you have kids? Or are you married? Or do you live with your relatives? Do you do this or do that? Socially, that's fine.
And I would
it is socially unacceptable, to ask certain other questions,
Right.
Like a lot of times when it comes to like, your habits or whatever, like, you're not really allowed, nobody really asks those questions. Oh, okay. Walter said in Canada they can't ask personal questions either.
Right.
But it's
They
still
really,
one of those things where it's like, are you asking because you're using that to make a decision on whether you want to hire me, or are you just filling in dead space, or are you just trying to get to know me, or like what's, and we do a lot of this.
right.
I know before maybe the 80s, like they didn't really have those questions. Like people, I saw an interview, and I don't know who it was, Peter Jennings, Walter Cronkite, somebody in the news. And it's so funny, these newscasters, I get all the newscaster job interviews. But he said he went to his employer and he said, look, I've got to make an extra $100 a week because I just got married and I want my wife's father to believe I can take care of my wife. And he said, and if you give me this raise, I'll never ask you for another raise. And he actually never asked for another raise again to get like this extra $100. He ended up working somewhere else later. But he said, yeah, he goes, I told him, like, if you just give me this extra $100 so I can like please my wife's father, and now it's like you can't really say that. So
Well, and to answer your question on what do you say when you're, and I do think that happens sometimes if you're shocked in an interview and you accidentally answer a question. But if you're prepared, I guess twofold on that. One is if somebody starts asking you personal questions, you can say, I'm a really private person. I'd rather not go into that right now. And that's a way to answer it. I had someone ask me after I'd been working somewhere for a while if I had a specific disability. Like he came in and said, and I'll just tell you guys, I was diagnosed with ADHD and he had come in and I was working on something. He's like, what is that? And I said, oh, it helps me focus. And he goes, what are you, ADHD? And this was a boss of mine. He was a vice president of human resources. And I said, you can't ask me that question. And I've had, oh my goodness, I've had the vice president of HR in another company come in and say, you need to hire young. I'm like, you guys, you can't say these things. So, it happens. But I think to say, I'm just a really private person. Mm-hmm. And then as far as the legal side of things, it is so, I'm not going to say don't do it, but it is, you're opening up a really expensive can of worms, and it's really hard to prove that someone said a specific thing, and it's really unfortunate. But I think, that's it's tough. That's a tough call, I on whether or not you actually file anything against that company. Sometimes they deserve, if it's really egregious, I think they deserve to have at least something filed against them. Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, no problem.
I think that's good that you say that. What were you going to say, Misty?
Oh, I was just thinking that what I tend to tell people is you have, I believe it's 2 or 3 options. I forget now, my brain. One is you could plain period, go ahead and answer the question. You can answer it. But what I find a lot of times is actually the person that's being interviewed opened up the can of worms.
Interesting.
That's usually
You're right.
80% of the time what happens, and the employer is actually really just following up.
Oh, okay.
Most 80% of the time, a job seeker, the person that's being interviewed, spills it. In their personal commercial, they may have said, "Oh, I'm a mom of 2," and you open the door.
I see that in my job club.
Yeah, they do it a lot.
So in my job club.
Yeah, really.
I'm a single mom. I've got 3 kids. I really need a job. And in my job club, I'm like, okay, that's fine in the job club, kind of, because we've got a lot of other single moms that can maybe make you feel supported, and they can help you, and they can, embrace you and tell you, yes, I know it was hard for me, and this is where I found a job, and, these are things I did. So that's like the plus side. But the minus side, what I've learned, and especially in like pregnancy particularly, is, a lot of employers kind of can choose a more qualified candidate and it's very hard to prove that now they did not hire you because you were pregnant. Granted, if you can see that you're pregnant, but the problem is like, it's very easy to kind of brush off the pregnant job applicant because she, it's like, well, you're going to take some time off because you're having a baby, and it's like, yeah, but can I start and then, just take my month off or whatever and then come back, and a lot of employers just either they assume you might not come back or they assume that you might take longer than, obviously a month or 6 weeks or whatever. A lot of people will take more time. And so they're just like, well, that's okay. So I do feel like you kind of set yourself up for some things when, like you said, you open that door of whatever. You might just say something really simple. I got to get out of my mom's house. I got to get my own apartment. And then it's like, oh, you live with your parents? Oh, okay. So you're mad at your mom and you're looking for, you know what I mean? Like
Right.
you do that in your
I've
head.
had people tell me that they're coming off of, I've sued my last company. I've had people tell me those types of things. And, and as an interviewer, you're like, oh, really? Well, what happened? You do the follow-up questions because you know what? And one of the things I always tell my clients is be careful of silence. Be comfortable with silence, because what a lot of employers or a lot of interviewers will do is just be quiet. And you as an interviewee want to fill that space, and you start just telling way more than what you intended on telling. So be comfortable with the silence. And whether that, you don't want to have a stare down or anything, but, just kind of like, okay, if they're not saying anything, I don't need to fill that space. Because usually you're going to fill it with things that you didn't plan on saying.
Yep.
Yeah, you kind of have to look at it like a long-term relationship. Like,
Yes.
comfortable in the silence. Like, you have nothing to say? Me neither. How about those Nets?
That's right.
How about those Cleveland Browns for Kat?
I know. I get text, guys. I'm getting text. Something's going on. I don't know.
Oh, okay. But I wanted to say, so people can answer the question. So that's one of the options. The other option is they can do what I call the politician role. The politician role basically gets to the meat of the question. So how many kids do you have? Well, if you're concerned about me getting to work okay, or if you're concerned about if I'll be here at 8, or please know that I'll be doing my job 110%, I'll be here at 8. I have an A, B, C, and D backup plan to get here on time to do my job efficiently. Boom.
So you're not answering that question. Nice.
Not even answering it. And I've told them the third option I've said is, hey, you could blame it on me. Say, oh, I was in this class, this workshop, and they were saying you couldn't ask questions like, I think it was Misty that was teaching it, and she was saying you couldn't ask questions like that were illegal. Like, I call it playing dumb. I say play dumb and say, oh, I was in this class and they said you couldn't say these, you couldn't ask these questions. I said that gives them the opportunity to back up and go, oh, let me rephrase that question.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good one. Exactly.
So I think those are the three options I think that people have. But one thing I wanted to mention to you guys was my thing is to try and do your research to the best of your ability so that you don't have the mishaps.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So my thing is if there is somebody on LinkedIn that's in my network, or someone that's in my network that's networked with somebody that's in the company or has worked for the company, or if on Facebook I can put a post update and say, hey, I'm interviewing with Humana Insurance. Has anybody ever worked for them before? Can we chat? To try and, go into Glassdoor, get as much research as possible.
Right.
My son actually got a call for an interview for a job about a month ago. And it was, I won't name the company. And the moment I told my daughter, she goes, Mom, don't have him go. They have you sell stuff door to door. don't have him go. And see, so that, and then by the time I got home, my son had talked to 2 of the neighbors about it, and they said, yes, they were telling the same thing. We've heard about that company, and this is what they do. And so, he called him back and said, I'm sorry, I decided to pursue something else. But, so I really think that our network, they say that our net worth is our network.
Yes.
And so I really believe that we just have to put that into place and use it for ourselves. So do as much research on the front end to lessen the mishaps. Is it possible? Yeah. But I think if you try and do as much research as possible, I think you'll really get to know, ask about the turnover, ask about, have they said you were going to do one job and you went in, you did something else. What is the company culture? How do people dress? Is there room for promotion? What have you seen? What's the thing you like the best working there? What's the thing you like the least? Or, just really kind of get as much information ahead of time as possible,
Yeah. And that's what I like. I think a few things I like really about Glassdoor, and I just did a review on Glassdoor of a couple of companies that I've worked for in the past. And first of all, they don't take reviews beyond like 1 or 2 years. So you can't go back to a company you used to work with 10 years ago. They don't like that. But the other thing is they even ask you if you can take pictures of the work environment and post them, which I didn't know, because I wouldn't take pictures of one of these environments. Like I really would have been one like, do you see what's wrong? It would have been me. But no, to be honest, like, when they do ask questions, they ask about your interview. They also ask, are you current or former employee? Which I think is really helpful, because I think when you get a lot of former employees, I hate to say it, you get a lot of disgruntled people that it wasn't a good fit for. So it's really good to get an opportunity to listen to people that are still working there, that have their positives. Because, one thing that I am learning a lot is, like, when you're doing that research, you also have to consider the source. So if you hate door-to-door sales, you hate sales at all, you don't want to introduce yourself to people, you don't like it'll never be a good fit for you to do that job. Right. But if you talk to somebody else who loves door-to-door sales, and they're telling you it's great, you get to go door to door, and you meet all these people, and like you can practice your comedy act if you like comedy. There's one guy, I don't know if you saw him on he's like on Facebook, and he did this comedy act with like cleaning supplies. The guy who comes to your door and sells like that little bottle that's supposed to like clean enough of everything for like a year, and you just add like 5 gallons of water, and like, I don't know, that guy. Well, he did a video, and he had all these funny jokes in it, and the family came out and they were recording him, and he was doing his little spiel and telling jokes and, rubbing doing all these things. And it was a viral video. He kind of like ended up on like, I don't know, like a couple of talk shows and different things. So for him, that was a really good fit for sales, because he got good at it and people thought he was funny. And I think he was a comedian in general, like that was his end game. So it was like, you can practice your craft, because now you can go up to these people, they're total strangers, you use your comedy and try to sell them stuff, and they might like you. So whatever and I think sales does get a very bad rap, because everybody is very against sales. I've noticed that a lot. Sales.
I actually have to pop out. I'm just looking at the time here. I've got to pop out, but I just wanted to, I'm sorry. I just want to let you know.
9:30, so it's time to go. And we are going to wrap. I guess we've got like 2 more minutes. I'll wrap us up.
Okay. All right. I'll talk to you guys later.
All right.
Okay. Bye.
Bye, guys.
Bye. But I do want to say, when you're researching, make sure that you're not just taking everybody else's opinion, that you really think of who you are as a person. And if it speaks to you and everybody else thinks you're crazy, you got to listen to your heart in doing that research as well, because that can be the difference. Like, maybe nobody in your family really likes door-to-door sales, but maybe your son might have found it to be the most interesting thing. You know, he might meet a cute girl that answers the door and, you know, marry her or something. You never know what could happen.
And you know, I think you had to pay for your kit and stuff or whatever.
Oh, I have a friend that did. She sold knives, and I don't.
Yeah, I think that's what it was too. Yeah,
he did excellent at it. But you know what? She lived in an upper middle class neighborhood. You know, she did the college angle. You know, if you buy these knives, you know, she did a lot of friends and family bought the knives. Like, oh, we're helping our friend's daughter, you know, pay for college. And it really worked for her. You know, now she's like a doctor or something like that. But yeah, it really worked for her. But I think it kind of depends on your network, and it depends on, you know, who you're around and who wants to pay $200 to $300 for some sets of knives to help you go to college. Because some people have friends and family like that, and some people don't. So know your audience is really important in those sales positions. And there's other sales positions that don't require any money. You know?
Exactly.
So that's always good. All right, Misty, thank you so much for being here. Thank you, everybody who's come on board. Next time, I want you guys to have questions.
That's fair. That's fair.
I want questions from our group of people. Like Jay and Walter.
Walter did excellent. He had three questions.
Well, he had two responses about Canada, especially. Actually, yeah, he did really good. But I want some more interaction from our audience next time. So we're gonna put you on the spot next time. Yeah. All right. Well, thanks so much, Miss.
We might want to remind people that next Monday is December 7th.
Yep.
So Monday, December 7th, 7 p.m. Central Standard Time, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. We'll be back here on Blab.
Oh, yes. Thank you so much. Well, yeah, we're going to post something up, and then you guys can, what do you call it? Register, pre-register, so that you know.
Subscribe. They can
yeah.
subscribe, maybe,
subscribe
I think.
To the next Blab. So we'll see you next Monday. Take care, everybody. Bye.